It is the Sunday of love, as it has been here and in other places, from time out of mind. What is this thing, as the song said, this thing called love? Of all the things we know the least of this. There is no word that defines it. There is no concept that contains it. And yet there is no thing for which life is more worthwhile. And yet, also, is there anything more universal? Here, as the light has reached its nadir, when we reach the point on this hemisphere when night threatens to overtake the day, we look towards something that brings light and warmth of its own. The yearning to be with one another. And so we pause here in the shadow of a morning and try to light a candle in our hearts as well as in our church. It will be dim, but it will grow. With this in mind and in heart, the candle of love will now be kindled by Hadley Newhouse. Oh, come ye all and sing now as well a relatively new carol Advent hymn by the author of Morning Has Broken, Eleanor Fargen. This text I think I like even more than that. It speaks to that which comes from the east. People look east, the time is near. Shall we sing it together?
People
Some of you know what I'm going to do already, don't you? Some of you don't, so I'm going to give you a hint. That is an actual numbered lithograph of Dr. Seuss's book cover. I purchased it a few years ago. It is a prized possession. And almost as a signal to be wise and wary about life, the hook in my office gave way and the original fell and broke into pieces. Fortunately, the print was unmarred. So, I give way to a better writer, poet, theologian than I am myself. It's always good to give deference to those from whom you learn. Every Who down in Whoville loved Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with Grinch fingers nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early and they'd rush for their toys. And then, oh, the noise. That's the one thing he hated. The noise. And then the Who's young and old would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast. And they'd feast. And they'd feast. They'd feast on Who pudding and Who roast beast, which is something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. And they'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this whole Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like St. Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some empty old sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Get up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed. And he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who's stockings were all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present: the pop guns, bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And then he stuffed them in bags, and the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, the Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree and started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a line, he thought it up quick. "Why, my little tot," the fake Santa Claus said, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there and I'll bring it back here." And this fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink and sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. The last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn. All the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a-snooze, when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, their ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings, 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet. He rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh, pooh to the Who's, he was grinchishly humming. "They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up, I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open in a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo." "That's a noise," grinned the Grinch, "that I simply must hear." So he paused, and the Grinch put a hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, and it started to grow, but the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. There ends the scripture reading for this morning. Thanks be to God. So, how large is your heart today? We're heading toward the offering. Are you all warmed up? Is your puzzler not completely sore? What good is all this? Am I doing the right thing? Now, this is the offering, right? I get caught up in things. I forget what I'm supposed to do. But isn't that the point? We frequently find ourselves going from point to point on our checklist. I have a list at home, and I cross things off every day. Those that I remember, of course. But I fail to put on the list, be merry. Be good. As though somehow if I tick all the boxes, they will happen automatically. No, you must choose to be merry, which I'll speak about in some length another moment. But you also have to choose to be good, because the world does not improve itself. You have to make it better. And that's what the offering is for. We do 2 things with the money you put in the plate. One is to sustain this institution, which for 150 years has been an alternative, a sanctuary, an example, a gadfly, a community unlike any other in Grand Rapids. If you think that should continue, that there is good that our existence brings, you put money in the plate. But we also do something else. It is not about us in the end. It's about the communities that are beyond us, whether they're neighbors or friends, those that we don't see in our pews, but nonetheless are part of our communities, people of color, children, the poor, the unsheltered, the scared, those who fear. And half of our offering every week is devoted to serving those communities through organizations we support. Sometimes you can find out about them from our website, but the point is, whatever cash you drop on that plate is holding up 2 parts of the world. And you need them both to be there. With that in mind, and is the choir going to sing the offertory anthem? So I want those folks to be able to move up here, and I'll come over here and say, ushers, wait a moment or two, because we're going to have a wonderful offertory anthem. And when they start singing, you start giving, right? Thank you so much. Your offering will soon be gratefully received, and so will this gift of the choir. thank you. What a wonderful, prayerful moment that was, and I'm really grateful for that. And not inconsiderable in the effort it took. It takes real focus for a choir to hear all the different harmonies and dissonances that make it so powerful. Thank you. So I'm preaching on mystery in Advent, the mystery of faith, the mystery of hope, and this Sunday, the mystery of love. And as I thought about this, and I think about it for several days before any words begin to make any kind of sense, all that came to mind was a saccharine song. Ah, sweet mystery of life at last. It's a chestnut, and true to my musical tastes, it comes out of an opera, actually an operetta by the Austrian-American composer Victor Herbert. It's a famous operetta, Naughty Marietta, and we also get two other old chestnuts from that. The Italian street song. Anyone besides me remember hearing that in their youth? Or tramp, 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 the boys are marched. My point is that when we think of love and mystery, it gets kind of saccharine really fast. So much so that it becomes a cliche. It turns up again in other moments. Who here remembers Young Frankenstein, the movie? Who remembers Madeline Kahn falling for the monster and breaking into, ah, sweet... And I discovered there is a Tom and Jerry cartoon by the same name. So it's part of the cliched experience of love. And I want to talk about the cliched experience so that we can get beyond that. In fact, a few years ago during Lent, I preached a whole series on love, chiefly to destroy that cliche and others, because I think that cheapens love when it devolves into a song, a lyric, or a mere expression of hormones. Because love is not like that. Romance is, no question about it. And so let me get a couple of minutes here, give a couple of minutes to distinguishing romance from love. And I want to give romance its due. I was very sad one day in school in my junior year, and remember it well, and I was not a manly man then or now, and so I was fighting off tears for reasons I cannot remember. But a fellow bandmate, band players tend to be pretty close to one another. Jane, she played the clarinet, I played the euphonium, so we only saw each other across the room. But we had known each other for a while, and she saw me in the hall looking bereft, and there, between classes, she kissed me. Oh, that was all it took. I was smitten. And so began my first romance. 6 teenage months of longing and fearing and wanting and worrying and not knowing anything about what I was feeling, but having a lot of feelings, let me tell you. Rare is the person who has not been there, nor is the one who eventually had their heart broken when it came to its ultimate end. It was, I must give Jane credit, about as gentle a letdown as one could expect. Turns out she became a nurse. I think I was her first patient. But we all survive our first romance. And 2 years later, which is an eternity in youth, I know, I was at the beginning of another romance that lasted longer, about 43 years. But that's the euphemism for saying, yes, I've been married that long. But in some respects, I'm lying, because honestly, the romance, that was over a long time ago. And I'm grateful, exceedingly grateful for that. Anyone here remember the movie Moonstruck? 1980. I struck a chord. Good for you. Well, I used to live in that neighborhood, and it was fun to be there. But if you don't know it, Cher plays a widowed woman who was living at home with her parents, Joseph Gardenia and Olympia Dukakis. And toward the end of the movie, she has essentially fallen for the younger brother of her fiancé and has spent the night with him and comes in early that morning looking rather disheveled. And Olympia Dukakis looks at her as she confesses where she's been, and Olympia Dukakis, in a voice that can only belong to Olympia Dukakis, says, "Do you love him?" "Ma, I love him awful," says Cher. "Ah, that's too bad." She knows, I know, and many of you know, that romance is not love. It is exciting. It is alluring. It's a lot of fun. And that's partly why we cannot figure it out and partly why we fall for it over and over. Why did Jane kiss me? I have no idea. Why did I swoon? Can't tell you. Was she attracted to me? Was I attracted to her? For that matter, did Wendy and I fall in love for some particular reason? Why does anyone fall in love? It really doesn't make sense. The French writer and wit Paul Valéry defined love, or probably romance, as two people being stupid together. So now I'm going to get a little intellectual to prove that I'm a preacher, not just an entertainer. Back in 1990, I read most of a rather controversial, if not notorious, book by Camille Paglia called Sexual Persona. It's a doorstop of a book, which takes up the old contrast between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, which broadly means the tension between conscious intellect and unconscious emotion. It's more than that, but that'll help you at least know which way I'm pointing. Reaching back to the ancients, Paglia says that the quarrel between Apollo and Dionysus is the quarrel between the higher cortex and the older limbic and reptilian brains. She's saying that when you fall in love, it's your inner lizard that's going on a walk. But she did not come up with that. A century earlier, the controversial but nonetheless brilliant Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a book called The Birth of Tragedy, in which he posited that these two forces met in the Greek tragedy and combine in a story where a protagonist vainly struggles to overcome implacable fate, tries to use the mind to penetrate the impenetrable, and almost always fails. But we come away, in some sense, deepened because we've experienced what Nietzsche calls the primal unity, even in that conflict. Okay, what has this to do with love and romance? Well, let's be clear, or at least I'm going to try to be clear. Love is a deep dive into the deep end of the Dionysian pool, a world of emotion and experience that defies logic and reason. What's more, that's part of its appeal. We want to be swept up, swept away. We want to be carried off in swirls of emotion and drama. And that is what mystery itself is about, isn't it? The sense that there's something going on that you can't quite grasp, but is real and is pulling you, and you want to feel it. You want to get caught. It's like a tide. Why do we go to the sea? We could swim in a pool, but we get into the water in the seashore and we feel the water tugging at us, and that's part of the power we want to experience. That's what we think love is. But no, that's romance. And here's why we have to distinguish the two. Two quick stories. One is a seaside story, and I think I've shared this with you at least once. So many years ago, when my 6'4" son was about 3'4", we were at the seashore with some friends down on the Outer Banks, I believe. And we all went into the ocean. Now, he was a youngster, and we didn't go far, and I wandered in with him on my hip. You know that when you have your arm around a kid and they have their arms around your neck, and their legs are wrapped around your waist, and here comes a wave, and it comes over, and he's terrified, and I laugh, and so he laughs. And another one comes, and I laugh, and so he laughs. And the spray is filling us, and we're having the most wonderful time. We're just getting, the rhythm of the ocean is wonderful, but the tide is actually going out. And a strong wave comes, and before I know it, it not only hits us, it is pulling the sand out from under my feet, and I am now falling. And the next wave comes in, and so it knocks us down again, and Stephen's legs let go. And I can feel his arms letting go, and I literally have to hold him by the wrist, and only the wrist, and hope that I can get up in the next wave, which I did. But my nose is running because I've been swamped with the seawater, and I'm dragging him up onto the beach. And mind you, the lifeguard is no more than 20 feet away, but he's ready to jump in. And that's what happens when you get too close to the power that's greater than you. That's my point. That's what happens with romance when you let it go. It can sweep you away in bad ways, too. Anyone here remember a book from about 1992 called The Secret History? It was Donna Tartt's first book. She's a really fine writer. And she conceived this tale of college students who fall in love with ancient Greek mythology, and they recreate the Dionysian rites in the woods. And they started enacting the ritual, the mythology, the myths of Dionysus. And do you know what those rituals are? Well, in ancient times, it ended in a frenzied dance in which they tear the god apart, limb from limb. And in ancient Rome, they reenacted it by chasing animals and tearing them apart while they lived and eating the meat raw. And that's what happens in the book. The students become so enthralled, so ecstatic, so involved, so taken up in their Dionysian moment that they literally kill someone and then have to hush it up. By the way, these rites in ancient days took place around the winter solstice. Think of it as a primitive form of saying Merry Christmas. Now that quality doesn't sound like romance, does it? But it's being engaged with this powerful quality that you don't understand, that's exciting and alluring, and you know it's kind of dangerous. And it's not just about romance. I remember reading John Maynard Keynes, the great economist, who explained the vicissitudes of the marketplace as being due to what he called the animal spirits, our unpredictable qualities, our herd mentalities. You may have heard that Christmas was against the law in Puritan New England, and we think, oh, that means they couldn't hang up their stockings. No, it meant they couldn't get drunk. Because in 16th century England and 17th century England, Christmas was a time to get blotto, carry on, and assault people. Maybe the Puritans were not wrong. In fact, when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, he was trying to say, this is a way to celebrate Christmas without becoming criminals. The mystery can be dangerous. The sense of power can be intoxicating. Why, though? Why do we get caught up in such things? Because mystery says there is more in the world than we know. The mystery of faith, I said 2 weeks ago, is that we have no rational basis to believe that tomorrow is going to work out at all. But we do it anyway. The mystery of hope was that we choose to believe that this uncertain world still matters and that we matter too, even if we can't prove it. The mystery of love is that we need to feel this hope, not just think about it. Feel it in both senses of the word, as a sensation of our bodies and as an emotion in our hearts. We are not thoroughly human without touching the universe and being touched by it. It is not enough to think. We must feel. Feel that primal unity, as Nietzsche called it. But as I thought, it's not primal unity. That's not right. That's romance. Love is looking for ultimate unity. Romance longs to go back, as it were, to that place when we were young children and could nestle inside of a parent in their embrace. And we've seen in another the promise of safety and adoration. But love is not about that. Love is looking for a unity that has never been found. Romance says one person can fix everything about our lives, be all the things you lack. A dream in which two people share the delusion that they are a universe unto themselves. It's a great fodder for love stories. Wagner's great opera Tristan and Isolde is about a romance so consuming that they literally extinguish each other with passion. Great music, lousy thinking. Because the truth is what Anne Morrow Lindbergh discovered when she wrote, when you love someone, you do not love them all the time in exactly the same way, from moment to moment. It is an impossibility. It is even a lie to pretend to, she says. And yet this is exactly what most of us demand, she continues, playing on the difference between romance and love. She goes on, we insist on permanency, duration, continuity, when the only continuity possible in life, as in love, is in growth, change. Not too many pages away, she comes up with this metaphor. Love does not consist in gazing at each other, but in looking outward in the same direction together. Romance finds in one person the hope that you matter. He is smitten with me. I must be worth something. Love sees in another person that all life matters, including that person and you. Love comes when the Liebestod is done and there are dishes to be washed, bills to be paid, laundry to be folded, when you have to live more than you love, when you are no longer able to be stupid together. And that's when love begins. It does not always happen. The divorce rate illustrates how many of us have unrealistic ideas of love. Because in the end, we're all grown-ups here, right? You have to decide to love someone. It is a choice. You have to decide to live. It is a choice. In marriage, it is realizing that a life together is more complete than a life alone. And this is true for some, but not all. I have a son who is single by choice. He loves in a wider circle. I am a parent. Those children have given me more reason to have faith and hope in the world. Because in the end, whatever it is, marriage, parenthood, friendship, comradeship, whatever it is, love is being committed to something larger than yourself that nonetheless gives your life meaning. It is quite simply valuing others as much as you value yourself. What we have heard forever is loving your neighbor as yourself. And if you think that's trite and a cliche, it is, but it is still the truth. Religion of all kinds asks us to go beyond a feeling that we mistake for love, because that is only ever part of love. An ingredient, yes, but love really needs more than one ingredient. Real love means choosing to care about someone even when you don't feel like caring about them, because they matter. It means trusting that love is more than how I feel today or tomorrow, or what I felt last year, or what I felt when we were dating. It means trusting that the commitment is larger than the moment. If you remember 2 weeks ago, I told you faith is just another word for trust. Remember that real love believes that the future matters more than the present. And last week I told you hope is a commitment to the future without knowing if it's going to turn out. Have you figured out where I'm going? Real love happens only when we are able to have faith and hope as well. There's a pattern here. These are not just 4 nice ideas that we do here. They are steps toward a complete life. We first must have faith in life. Not just our own, but in life itself. That we are betting it's worth the effort. And then, only then can we have hope that it could matter in some longer run without ever knowing if it's going to turn out. Only then are we able to take romance and turn it into love. The 3 ingredients, the 2 ingredients together with romance, faith, hope, romance, become love. And when that happens, what is the sensation we experience? It will be joy. It all makes more and more sense to me now. There is a mystery to life, but it is not one for me to know. It's one for me to use, to gather as an ingredient into living a genuine life. Yes, this makes more and more sense. Ah, sweet mystery of life. At last I found you, and faith and hope. And together I learned to love. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. Would you now join with me for a moment, one of silence and word and beyond, and bless this hour with your prayerful and attentive hearts. Help us to love, for it is not easy or natural. Oh, it's easy to fall in love, and it's easy also to fall out of it, because we do not need people falling into love. We need people standing in love, capable of trusting and hoping and living as though the world is worth saving. Every day that we give ourselves to something without knowing why or if or whether, we commit an act of love so small it cannot be measured. It is a crumb too small for a mouse. But day upon day, like grains of sand, like moments accumulating into hours, the love grows, mine and yours, imperfect, incomplete, but never ending. Help us to love, to care so deeply that we wish our hearts would break each day rather than be indifferent to the world around us. We need to love when we least feel it. Teach us to love. And let us also and ever be blessed by those who lived lives of loving before us and in our midst, whose course around the planets has concluded in years past, but who at this time of year we lift up in honor of their passing, in years near and far. We remember today Helen Rossano, Lee Rasmussen, Arlene MacDonald, Marinus Sweats, Anne Felgate, Doug Castleman, Edwin Wheeler, Peg Fay, Jack Waltz, and Peg Clemens. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekinah to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal rest. Shelter them beneath your wings eternally. Bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace. And let us say, Amen. And now you get to sing one of the great Christmas carols, the first Noel. Now this is a long one, long lines. You have to breathe deeply because the best part comes at the end when you can really, really power out the refrain. So turn to hymn number 237, the first Noel, and let's get some shepherds and wise guys together and have us a good old carol. Jonathan, can you help us? If here you have faith, take it with you into a world untrusting. If here you have found hope, go forth and share it with others who are hopeless. And if here you have known love, go back into a bruised and hurting world, letting them know that love is the only wise thing we are here to do, knowing that this day and indeed every day is a day which the Lord has made, and that it truly is the ties of love which bind us together and give dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all our days. Amen.